I love this parsha because as a theater person, I love the theatricality of it, how it is placed so well in the series of acts that is the Torah. Getting toward the end of Act 4 of our 5-act drama, it is a perfectly timed relief, as it were, for the main characters to take a step back for a few minutes. We can imagine them behind the scenes getting a makeup change, a cup of tea, changing their costumes to begin to enter again and prepare for their reappearance at the end of the Parsha and as we go forward in the dramatic book of Numbers into the final book of Deuteronomy. It is almost, and I say that with full awareness of my almostness with it, it is almost a comic incident in which Balaam and Balak end up hopping mad, sort of Rumpelstiltskin-like, as their plans to curse the Jewish people are thwarted time and time again. What they intend as curse becomes blessing. And as Balaam says over and over, I simply can't help it. These are the words I am bidden to say. Would that everyone who had intended to curse the Jewish people ended up giving a blessing, but some have. In multiple instances in this parsha, there are stumbling blocks, stumbling stones, which trip up the characters as they attempt to go about their evil errand. Early in the parsha, of course, Balaam sets out on his famous donkey, and their path is thwarted multiple times by an avenging angel holding a sword. Only the donkey can see the angel. Balaam cannot, and in a very famous moment, the donkey opens her mouth and speaks to Balaam, saying, have I ever been disloyal to you? Why do you treat me this way? My destiny was to be your servant. Have I ever been disloyal to you? And of course, he has to acknowledge no. But at every turn of the page in this parsha, we have those who would hurt the Jewish people stumbling on their own words, on their own stumbling blocks that get in the way. And I was struck by this profound confluence of events this week because I had the great honor of observing from thousands of miles away a ceremony of the placing of what are called Stolpersteine, stumbling stones, that I'm sure many of you have come into contact with. I have been blessed to do so in Italy a few years ago, where you are walking on your vacation or your tour, and suddenly in the pavement in countries all over Europe and beyond for 30 years, there has been a project called the Stolpersteine Project, which are plaques embedded into the pavement, many into charming cobblestone streets across Europe, that mark the last place that not only Jews, but many, many others found themselves in their last known place of residence, usually, sometimes a place of work if the residence was unknown, a plaque in the street that marks here lived, or sometimes here worked, a certain person before they met either their end or their deportation, or they fled, or they took their own lives. But their last known formal place of chosen dwelling before they went to the next chapter of their lives, too many cases it was the last, by the hand of the Nazi regime. These stumbling stones do just that. You almost stumble upon them. They're hard to trip on, but they do bring you up short as you walk along these beautiful streets in many cases, and suddenly come face to face with what was. And a dear friend of mine, actually for the second time in her life, this week flew to Germany with her extraordinary and beautiful family to watch her three sons stand up with her in the face of everything that the Nazis tried to destroy and very nearly did entirely. But to stand in front of the home where her parents, her mother, her aunt, and her grandparents had lived in the Spandau area outside of Berlin, and have Stolpersteine, stumbling stones, embedded into the pavement outside their home, what was their home, was so moving. And I'm so grateful for the malady that beset us this week, because I had not slept a wink. And so it was very easy to be up at the extremely pre-dawn hour here to see the ceremony live from Germany. It began with the members, the current owners of the house, paying tribute. And some people in the chat thought that was unusual, until I discovered later that most of the stumbling stones, most of the Stolpersteine, the payment for them is assessed to the current residents or the current owners of the home, if the home is rented, which I found extraordinary. This is a country that is facing, has faced, and will continue to face their history and the wrongs that were done. And these stumbling stones are actually very much like Balak and Balaam's mission. They become, in their original conception, a very mixed message, primarily, though, for the good. But the idea for the stumbling stones was actually taken from the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, themselves, because, as you all know, in so many instances, Jewish grave markers were broken up to line new roads in the concentration camps and around the Nazi camps and headquarters, which is just chilling. But they actually got the idea for the Stumbling Stone Project, which began in 1992, from that heinous practice. So something that was so intended to be a curse, that was a terrible desecration and a curse, after these many decades, has an element of uplift, an element of kavod, an enormous resonance of memory and love and honor and acknowledgement. There are only a couple of towns, Munich being prominent among them, where the Stolpersteine have been rejected. That may have changed since that was first reported. They didn't like the idea of the names of people who had once lived in these dwellings to be in the street, because by definition, they would be stepped upon. And they didn't feel that was sufficiently respectful or laudatory, that plaques on the wall or other kinds of memorials would be more appropriate. But thousands and thousands, tens and tens of thousands of Stolpersteine have been created in more than 20 languages and laid all over Europe. This parsha is an extraordinary one. And as we have noted, at its heart is this declaration that marks a place in the milestone of the Torah. If you're looking for your place in the Torah, the Matovu will always be at the top of a column. It's a stopping place along the way. The Matovu, which says, "How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, how your dwellings, O Israel, how lovely they are," is, of course, a beloved part of our service. It was one of the first songs I ever learned. As a little one, we would sing it every day. And it was a long time before I knew that that blessing was originally intended as a curse. And I'm especially moved by this idea that these Stolpersteine, and I will show you a picture in a moment, tech willing, that they stand or that they lay outside the dwelling places where our Jewish brothers and sisters lived. And of course, please, so many others. But I'm so moved by this idea that these dwelling places whose inhabitants were cursed, that all these years later, where they lived is a place of blessing and uplift. My friend Jackie Shelton Miller, whom some of you know, honored her mother and aunt and grandmothers and grandfather and her extended family by traveling to Germany and delivering a magnificent tribute in German, in perfect German, which she speaks because she was raised in a German-speaking home right in San Francisco in the Marina District, where her family ultimately came. Her mother and aunt left Germany on a Kindertransport to London. Her parents, a year later, they were extremely blessed to be able to flee and to look forward and not back. Jackie speaks of her family's journey. They had a beautiful department store, a tailoring business, haute couture, and they have a box of hangers that were in their family's department store. Those hangers held beautiful clothing and have traveled with the family. They are actually an art piece in Jackie's home. A number of them hang without anything on them. They themselves are the art piece. And the hangers say Peak, which was the family's last name. And they say in German, the good clothing. Jackie describes those hangers as not just representing the good clothing, but she also says they represent das gute Familie, das gute Liebe, the good family who lived a good life. We hear in our Torah portion and in our Haftarah, Ma Tov, how good. What is good, says Micah. The prophet Micah says, what is Tov, what is good, what is Gute, is to love mercy, to live justly, and to walk humbly with God. These Stolpersteine ensure that those who see them stop in their tracks and remember the goodness that was lived in these thousands upon millions of places of dwelling, that today we can absolutely say, Ma Tov, Ma Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. How good are these tents that we try to keep from blowing down in the wind? How magical are the dwelling places that live by Jewish values, the warmth and beauty and strength of our tradition. May we bring ourselves up beautifully short to pause and remember those dwellings where people lived and loved. I'd like to share with you a picture of these Stolpersteine that were laid for Jackie's family. And as you see them, these were laid in real time and then adorned with flowers and love for Alfred Aaron Peak, Henrietta Peak, Laura Peak, and Ilse Peak. Ilse was Jackie's mother. The top says, Hier wohnte, as most of them say, here lived. The family, the years they were born, and in this case, thankfully, Flucht, fled, and the country where they arrived, the United States of America. This picture was posted on Cantor Ra's Barracks Facebook, and I was so glad to see it because Cantor Raz is in Germany right now, teaching at the Cantorial School, I believe in Stuttgart. And the Peaks were members of Emmanuel and very close to Cantor Raz. And it was just a beshert that she was able to be there to sing the El Male Rachamim and to pay tribute to her dear friends. My friends, wherever we live, may our dwelling places, our tents, be worthy of honor. And may we remember these beautiful people who, in not nearly enough cases, but in many, found a way forward to live a new life in new dwellings. May we always remember what is good, and may we live by it. Shabbat Shalom.